These are the answers and work for the Module 3.1 Review A. So I'm going to go through, show you all the answers. You can pause it as long as you need to get those answers. And then I'll work some of them out. So here are the answers for 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8 and 9, 10, 11, and 12, 13, 14, and 15, 16 and 17, 18 and 19, 20 and 21, 22 and 23, 24, and 25. Now I'm going to go through and explain the steps to you. So if you need to see a certain problem, you can fast forward to that problem or rewind, whatever you need to do. So the first one, number 1, it asks you to factor 5x squared minus 25x. So the first step of factoring is to look for a GCF. 5 and 25 have a 5 in common. They also each have an x. So I would take the 5x out. I'm left with x minus 25 divided by 5 is 5. So I believe that's answer D. Number 2, ask you to factor x squared plus 12x plus 35. This has a 1 in front of it. There's no GCF. So since it's 3 terms, you go ahead and make your x. A times C is 35. B is 12. So the numbers that multiply to give me 35 that add to give me 12 are 5 and 7. Since A is 1, I can go ahead and take the shortcut. So it's x plus 5, x plus 7. Number 3, kind of along the same lines. This has a 1. There's no GCF. So I go ahead and make my x. A times C is 49. B is negative 14. So multiplies to give me 49, adds to give me negative 14 is negative 7 and negative 7. So it's x minus 7, x minus 7. Because A is 1, I can take that shortcut. That's not an answer choice, but this is. And remember, they write it with a 2 because it's the same thing written twice. That was answer choice B. Number 4, so I will look for a GCF, but 4, 15, and 25 have nothing in common. So I go ahead, make my x. A times C is negative 100. B is 15. So multiplies to give me negative 100, adds to give me 15 is 20 and negative 5. But I don't have, A is not 1. So I'm going to write 4x squared and my negative 25. And I'll write plus 20x minus 5x. Split it down the middle. So 20 and 4 have a 4 in common. They each have an x. So it's 4x, x plus 5, and then 5, negative 5, x plus 5. My daughter is not happy. It's bedtime. Sorry. So I get 4x minus 5, x plus 5. If I look at my answer choices, that's answer choice C. Number 5 through 7 ask you to simplify. So square root of 300, I would type it in my calculator. a decimal, so I break it down. I start with 2, and I use 2 until I can't. Then I try 3, and if 3 doesn't work, I go to 5. I go until I hit a 1. Then I find pairs. So I have a pair of 2s and a pair of 5s. So 2 times 5 is 10 on the outside, and the 3 is left under the square root. Number 6, square root of 140. Type it in, you get a decimal, so you break it down. So use 2 until you can't. Try 3. If that doesn't work, go to 5. 5 doesn't work, so you go to 7. Hit 1. So I have a pair of 2s. 5 times 7 is 35. Number 7. Anytime there's a negative under the square root, I know my answer is going to have an I. And so then square root of 16 would be 4. So my answer would be 4i. Number 8, square root of 6. Get a decimal, so you break it down. Use 2. 2 doesn't work, so you use 3. There's no pairs, so there's nothing you can do, so you just leave it as the square root of 6, which was choice A. Number 9, you would type this in your calculator, and the I button is second decimal point or period. Type it in exactly as you see it. And your screen should say -9 minus 7i. So just put -9 and a -7 in the second box. Number 10. So the 5 is the real part, so it'll stay. The minus will stay. Square root of -49 gives me an I. Square root of 49 is 7. So that was answer choice A. Number 11. Type that straight in your calculator. Remember the I is second decimal point or second period. And you'll get -21 and minus 20i, so just put a -20 in that second box. Number 12, it gives you this solution, asks you for the other one. So you circle the sign in front of the piece with I, write everything else down, and if it was, you have to have a plus and a minus. So we had the minus, so we go to the plus. That was answer choice C. This next set asks you how many solutions, and what type. So that's where you're using b squared minus 4ac. So the first problem on 13, your A is 3, B is 6, and C is 3. So you'll do 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 3. If you put that in your calculator, you get 0, which means there's one real solution, because when you add and subtract 0, it doesn't change anything. Number 14, you're using the same piece, the discriminant. This is the part that'll be on the board, and it's x squared plus 9x plus 2. So there's a 1 here, so A is 1, B is 9, C is 2. So it's 9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2, which gives me 73. Which, because it's a positive number, it's going to give me 2 real solutions. Number 15, same deal. A is 5, B is 10, C is 6. So it's 10 squared minus 4 times 5 times 6. Type that in my calculator, I get negative 20, which is going to give me 2 imaginary solutions. Number 16 asks me to solve by factoring, which means I'm going to factor, but I'm also going to keep going and set it equal to 0 and solve. So first term has a 1. So A is 1, B is 17, C is 30. So I factor it. So A times C is 30, B is 17. So my numbers are 2 and 15. Because A is 1, I can go straight to my shortcut. But because it told me to solve, then I have to go ahead and set them equal to 0. And when I solve these, I get negative 2 and negative 5 as my 2 solutions. Um, 17, so we get 3x squared plus 14x plus 8. Solved by factoring. There's no GCF. A is 3, B is 14, C is 8. So A times C is 24. B is 14. So my numbers are 2 and 12. I can't take the shortcut because A is not 1. So I keep the A and the C. And I add in the 2 and the 12. GCF of the left side is just x. So I get an x, 3x plus 2. GCF of the right side is 4. So I get a 4, 3x plus 2. So I get x plus 4, 3x plus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to set each side equal to 0. So one of my answers is negative 4. The other side, I'll subtract 2, divide by 3, so x equals negative 2/3. Number 18, 5x squared minus 7x equals 0, solved by factoring. So first thing I look for is a GCF. That's an x. 5x minus 7. There's nothing left to factor. So I set my factors equal to 0. X equals 0 is already an answer. So I'll add 7 and divide by 5. So I get x equals 7/5. Number 19. It asks you to solve by taking the square root. That means you need to isolate the x squared. So I'll subtract 4. Then divide by negative 2. And then to get rid of the squared, I take the square root. Anytime I take the square root, I get a plus or minus. In solving an equation, I get a plus or minus. Because I have a negative, I should have an I. And the square root of 16 is 4. Number 20, a little bit different, same principle. So we'll divide by 2. So we get x minus 8 squared equals 12. I got to get rid of the squared, so I take the square root. I took a square root while solving an equation, so I get a plus or minus. 12 is not a perfect square, so I break it down. I have a pair of 2's and a 3 left over. And then I add the 8 to get the x by itself. So in your answer, you have these 2 boxes. The 8's going to go here. The 2 square root of 3 is going to go there because it has to have the plus or minus with it. 21 is the last square root problem. So we get Got to isolate that x squared, so we'll add 5. Divide by 5. We got to get x, so we take a square root. We took a square root while solving an equation, so we get a plus or minus. 10's not a perfect square, but when you break it down, there are no pairs, so it has to stay the square root of 10. So your answer will be plus or minus the square root of 10. The next section asks you to solve the quadratic formula. So you have this equation. Your A is 1, B is 3, and C is 5. So anytime you do the quadratic equation, you're going to do the discriminant first. So that would be 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. And that gave me negative 11. Then you're going to do the whole formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That'll be on the board. So it'll be negative b, which was 3, plus or minus, we already did that part, it's negative 11 over 2a. And then finally for my answer, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. That's a negative 3. That's a 2. Negative 11, square root of negative 11 gives me an I. 11's prime, so it just stays the square root. And that's fine. That's your answer. You don't need to go any further. 23 gives you another one to solve the quadratic formula. A is 6, B is negative 1, C is negative 4. So discriminant first, always. So we get negative 1 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 4. That gave me 97. So I'll do the whole quadratic formula, which again, it's on the board. All you gotta do is write it down. So we get negative b which is negative 1 plus or minus the square root. We've already done that. That was 97 over 2a. So my answer, a negative 1's a positive 1 over 12. 97 does not break down, so we just leave it. That's your answer. You don't need to go any further. 24 is done in your calculator. So you're going to go to y equals, you're going to type in the equation. And when you're going to hit graph, and you should see this, something like that. The first question asks you for the x-intercepts, and it has this. So in order to do x-intercepts, you're going to do, you're looking for these two. This first one looks like it's between 1 and 2. So you're going to do second trace. You're going to choose number 2, which has zeros. It's going to ask you for a left boundary, so you're going to say 1, enter, 2, enter. And then it'll draw 2 lines there, so you'll say enter again, twice, and it'll give you 1.30 as your first one. You'll do it again for the other one. Second trace, choose number 2, which is the zeros. That one looks like it's between 4 and 5, so you'll do 4, enter, 5, enter. enter 2 times, and it'll give you 4.70. The next thing it's going to ask for is the y-intercept. It's where you're going to make x 0. So to do that, you'll do second graph to go to the table, and you'll go to where x is 0, and you'll see a -3. So your answer will be 0, -3. Oops, sorry about that. Your last one asks you for a max or minimum. This graph has a maximum right here. Looks like it's at 3. So I'm going to do second trace, show me the maximum. And I'll say look between, it looks like it's at 3, so I'll say look between 2 and 4. And then I'm going to hit enter twice. And it'll spit out 2.99999, which rounds to 3, 1.5. $25. The key phrase here is revenue minus cost, and I'll put that in red for you. So you're going to do revenue minus the cost. Well, the revenue is the R equation, 1.3x. Cost is the C equation, 0.625x squared minus 5. So you'll put that in y equals. You'll look at your graph. It's going to look something like this, roughly. And it asks you, the key word here is what is the maximum. So you're going to go second trace, show me the maximum. It looks to be at 1, so I'm going to say look between 0, enter, and 2, enter. You'll hit enter twice, and it'll spit out 1.04, 5.68. Your profit is that second number, so it's $5.68. So those are the answers. You can go back, see what you need to see. Don't forget to make your note card, and be sure that you're using your time wisely. You do have a test tomorrow. Go ahead and do the second review, and then you can check your answers for that one.